The story of the miracle of the feeding of the 5,000 is a favorite of mine. Not so much because of the content of the meal, bread and fish, as much as the fact is that it speaks to the issue of God's abundance in the midst of tremendous scarcity. Thousands of people were present, and there's almost no food to feed them. Not that we know anything about scarcity these days. I mean, I still have photos on my phone from the first major grocery shopping trip after the pandemic hit, of all those bare shelves where the toilet paper used to be. It said 1 package per customer on the sign. One store actually got pretty creative. Their sign read, "Valued customer. Due to the recent outbreak of stupidity and panic purchasing, the nation is currently experiencing a shortage of toilet paper and common sense." Of course, that's not all that went missing. That's not all that was scarce. We couldn't get hand sanitizer or sanitizing wipes, and those are still hard to find. We struggled to find pasta, beans, yeast, and flour, among other things. I felt like we were seeing what scarcity looked like. And I wonder if looking at all those empty grocery store shelves felt a little bit like what the disciples felt as they looked out over the crowd of thousands with just those 5 loaves and 2 fish in hand. Of course, this pandemic has brought much worse forms of scarcity to us. For some, that scarcity is financial, a lack of money, job, or housing. For others, being in isolation has meant a scarcity of human fellowship or sense of community, and that can even translate into a sense of lack of love. It's as though love itself were scarce. Given all the chaos and instability around us right now, many of us are feeling scarce on peace or peace of mind too. It's hard to find peace in the midst of the storm raging around us as a society. In this time of scarcity, maybe you feel like a member of that hungry crowd of thousands, and there just isn't enough. A couple of loaves and fishes are just not going to suffice. So what are we to do in this time and place of things we need and cherish when they are so scarce? Let's look to see what Jesus does in the face of scarcity in our story. Notice the first sentence in our reading today tells us that Jesus withdrew to a quiet place, presumably for solitude and prayer. It was out of the grounding that Jesus had in his relationship with God the Father that he was able to address the needs that had been brought to him. So there Jesus was, face to face with a huge crowd, with people all in desperate need. And what was Jesus' response? The text says that he was filled with compassion for them. This Greek word for compassion stems from the concept of being moved from the seat of love within. And then notice our psalm today begins with a similar phrase. The Lord is gracious and filled with compassion. Compassion is at the heart of God and is how God relates to us. We can find comfort in the compassion that God has for us in our need, in our scarcity. And then we look out into the world. And as followers and imitators of Jesus, we too are called to look upon the crowds with compassion. We too are to have hearts like Jesus, open to be moved from the seat of love. Next, we see the disciples urging Jesus to send the crowds away, to go find food for themselves. I think this is often a natural response when we see a need. I know that's often my knee-jerk reaction. And sometimes that might be the right response. Sometimes people are already equipped and able to meet the needs they have, but not always. We can become so oppressed or lonely or starved or poor that we can't fulfill our need without help from someone else. And that's why we need compassion to be our guide, so that we can discern compassionately when our help is needed and when God just wants to bless someone through us. Jesus knew that day that God wanted to bless the crowd through him. While sending the people away was very logical of the disciples in the face of scarcity, it wasn't motivated by compassion or faith. So instead, Jesus says, "Give them something to eat." But the disciples remind him again of that scarcity problem. Jesus, we have nothing here but 5 loaves and 2 fish. And have you seen the empty shelves in the grocery store? I can just see this story playing out in the pandemic. Jesus, we have 5 rolls of toilet paper and 5,000 people who need TP. But what is Jesus' response to their statement? He takes the little that they do have, he takes those 5 loaves and 2 fish, and he looks up to heaven, and he blesses, and he breaks the bread, and then directs the followers to give them to the crowd. When Jesus looks up to heaven, of course, it's looking to God and asking God to bless the scarce resources, to bless what little they have, the not enough, and to make it enough. Jesus has faith in God's abundance, and that's why he can give so freely. When I was rector in St. John's in the Portland area, our parish decided to hold a Cinco de Mayo party. We had a very active feeding program there for the poor and the hungry, and the church publicity and the signs that the organizers made wrote in big letters, "Everyone welcome." A couple of our homeless guests from the feeding program asked me, "Is that sign true? Is everyone really welcome?" "Of course they are," I said, and didn't think much about it. The night of that Cinco de Mayo party, we had about 10 people turn up that hadn't RSVP'd. They were 10 of our homeless guests. As they came to the door, our organizers became rather anxious. Even I was worried that we might not have enough seating or food. But then, some of the members who had RSVP'd for the party didn't come for one reason or another. About 10 of them, actually. So we had enough seats. And then when the kids began to play games and hit the piñata, it was our homeless friends who were clapping and who were cheering them on the loudest. Truly, they were enjoying and reveling in being a part of the abundance of community. We served the meal, and there was plenty. Everyone had a fantastic night. As I stood back towards the end of the evening and just looked out over the crowd, I thought, this is a miracle. And yes, there was enough. In fact, there was an overabundance of food, and we actually had to send home people with leftovers. When we are confronted with scarcity, whether it's our scarcity or someone else's, how might we entrust ourselves to the God of abundance? Because the God of the Bible, the God Jesus taught us to trust, is a God who can take our not enough and turn it into more than enough. A brief phone call, a card, a smile. God could take those little small offerings we give and bless someone with a sense of love and community through it. A donation to our outreach ministries, like to Moms or to Big Table and others, can bless someone deeply in need right now. A prayer for someone who is struggling can bring them peace and calm when there is only distress. As we live more like Jesus from a place of faith in God's abundance, we can confront the scarcity in life and rejoice in the blessing of God's abundance. My friends, with God, there is always enough. So let's be generous. There is enough love and peace, enough grace to go around for all of us. Someone must have told this story about Jesus to a young nun who came to her superiors with 3 pennies and a dream from God to build an orphanage in Calcutta. They tried to discourage her, saying that she could not possibly build an orphanage or anything for that matter with 3 pennies. But Mother Teresa smiled and said, I know, but with God and 3 pennies, I can do anything. And she did. Amen.